Hey everyone! Today I am going to be making a wood sign using a custom stencil I created out of vinyl, and I'll be using the Chalk Couture pastes to make the sign. So I started by, I use a Cricut, the vinyl cutting machine, and some Oracle vinyl. This is just the regular vinyl. It's not the heat transfer vinyl. I bought a couple sheets so I can make a few stencils like this for these types of occasions. Today I am making a wood sign. I have taken some pine boards and cut that into 12-inch. I've gone through and I've painted those, and then I've also distressed them using a darker undercoat and then applying white on top and then sanding it down a little bit so it gets that cool little distressed look. I have also sealed the board with a polyurethane before I started this process as well. What I'm doing now is I am taking that vinyl stencil that I created, and I took all of the little inside letter pieces. I placed that stencil, and then I went through and I weeded out the inside of the O, the inside of the A, as well as the P and a few other letters, just so I make sure that when I go into that next step of applying the chalk, that those letters look as they should. You can use, they have some stencil fonts out there that help minimize that, but you do end up with a couple little different lines. There are some smaller pieces like in the T or the bottom part of the P that you'll see later on in the video. I just use that same weeding tool and kind of scratch out the little piece. If the pieces are a little too small, it's not worth trying to stick that tiny little section in there. You can go back and clean up on most surfaces. I will say I use this technique on chalkboards as well as wood, and I have found using the chalk paste on wood, it just comes out, or actually they both come out very similar, but as far as time and energy, the wood is hands down the easiest of the two. I'm going to go through also the different squeegees. These are the Chalk Couture squeegees. I actually just recently ordered, you can see the one there in my hand. This is our regular squeegee. I also have cut a few of those regular ones in half to make a smaller working, when I'm working in some smaller tight areas. I just recently ordered this new squeegee. It fits perfectly in the jars. It's a little bit longer, and I don't know. It's actually, at first I wasn't thrilled about it because I thought, well, it might be a little bit bulkier, but quite honestly, after using it, I am a believer. I think this is an awesome new squeegee. The one thing I'd like to call out while using the squeegee and when I'm using these custom vinyl stencils is there is that angled piece of the squeegee that I normally use on my regular surfaces when I'm using my Chalk Couture transfers. Oddly enough, that angled side doesn't work the best. There's a little bit too much give, so when I'm doing some of the chalking on the chalkboards, or in this case this wood piece, I find using that straight edge actually is one of the best ways to apply that chalk paste. Now that I've got most of my chalk paste covering where the open stencil part is for all the lettering, I'm just going to go over and make sure that it's got a nice You know, nice coat. I'm going to remove some of that excess just like I would with some of the transfers. Again, on this wood surface, it's a little bit easier. If you're doing this on a chalkboard, you know, the pressure just has to be perfect because you'll create some thinner areas. So just beware if you're doing this on a chalkboard, that pressure in removing some of that excess counts. And quite honestly, you know, when in doubt on the chalkboard, just leave a little bit of that extra chalk paste in that scenario. All right, next we're gonna have the big reveal. Just like the Chalk Couture transfers, you're going to peel that stencil up. I like to go from a corner, you know, again, use that weeding tool if you need to get that edge up, but go slow. There are parts, again, you know, letters that are, you know, those smaller pieces that as you're popping it up, just slow, even pressure. So that way those pieces you can see there in the G, you might need to, sorry my hand's blocking there, but you might need to use that weeding tool to just kind of pop it up a little bit. And don't worry about those inside pieces. Once we have this up, we're gonna let it dry just a little bit, and then we'll go back and make sure all those little pieces right there in the hashtag, as well as the O, we pop that up. The reason I say, you know, make sure that it dries a little bit is when this is wet, you can, you know, if the weeding tool, your hand slips a little bit, you run the risk of smudging or, you know, pushing the wet ink. So I would say it doesn't need to be, don't wait till it's completely dry. Because then that makes it a little bit harder to pop those letters out, or at least that's my preference. I wait till it's about maybe a half to 3/4 of the way dry, and then I go back through and I kind of pop, picking up sort of, you pick at the edge a little bit, and then you're able to kind of pull that right up without smearing any of the ink. Depending on the, you know, the amount of lettering that you have, you know, this may take a little or a lot of time, but definitely, you know, take your time. You've spent a lot of time and energy on getting to this part, so don't rush it. All right, and like I mentioned earlier, there were some of those little pieces, you know, again, using that weeding tool, you can kind of go back in there and you know, clean up some of those little parts. Again, helps if it's almost all the way dry to go back out there and sort of scratch it out. Clean up around some of those lettering if there was any sort of bleeding whatsoever. Right here, I'm just using a Q-tip to kind of clean up. I left one side dry and one side wet. I sort of dab in those areas that I had scraped out a little bit just to pick up a little bit of that chalk dust, and then I sort of dab it with that dry end as well. I'm using my heat gun here just to make sure that the chalk paste is completely dry, because my next step is I took it outside and again sprayed it with that polyurethane. I'm going to heat set it again, and then what you won't see is I step outside and I actually do another coat of that polyurethane one more time, just so I can make sure that I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I enjoyed making it. Please like and subscribe, and if you're interested in Chalk Couture, please reach out, because I'd love to have you join the team.